Billionaire noticed his maid's daughter hiding bruises. What he discovered broke his heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. In a mansion perched on the hills of a wealthy neighborhood, James Caldwell, the billionaire real estate mogul, lived a life most could only dream of. His home, a sprawling estate, was filled with luxurious furniture, sparkling chandeliers, and paintings worth millions. The silence in the house was always thick, only broken by the sounds of the staff quietly moving through their duties. Among them was Mia, the maid's young daughter. Mia had worked in the mansion for as long as she could remember, never asking for much. She was always seen, but never truly noticed. She was a ghost in the house, moving silently from room to room, cleaning and organizing, always careful to stay out of the way. Mia was young, no more than 10 years old, but she had already learned the art of invisibility. Her mother, Abigail, worked tirelessly as the head housekeeper, but it was always clear to Mia that they were not part of this world. James, on the other hand, was the definition of power. A man who built his empire from the ground up. He ruled his world with an iron fist. He had no time for the little people, and that included the staff who worked in his mansion. He paid them well, but he didn't see them as equals. Mia had always been in his periphery, nothing more than a small child doing her chores. James never paid much attention to her, but all of that was about to change. It started one afternoon when James walked into the mansion's grand hallway, the marble floors reflecting his polished shoes. As he passed the staircase, he noticed something strange. Mia was standing still, her eyes cast down, avoiding his gaze. She was holding a dish towel, but something about her posture caught his attention. It wasn't the usual submissive stance she always had when he passed by. This time, there was something different, something wrong. His eyes narrowed as he watched her from across the room. For a moment, he stood there, silently observing, and it was then that he saw it. She was trying to hide something. There, just barely visible under her sleeve, was a bruise. James froze. He had seen many things in his life, but seeing a young child, the daughter of one of his employees, hiding bruises that were obviously not from an accident, was something that shook him to his core. He couldn't just walk away from this. He needed to know more, but what could he do? His thoughts raced as he watched Mia carefully pull her sleeve down, trying to cover the bruise. Mia didn't want him to see, but James had already noticed. He made his way over to her slowly, his heart pounding with questions. "Mia," he said, his voice softer than usual. She looked up, startled, and for the first time, she looked directly at him. Her wide eyes were filled with fear, and for the first time in a long while, James saw her, really saw her. "What happened?" he asked gently, his tone full of concern. Mia hesitated, her lips trembling. She didn't want to answer. She didn't want anyone to know about the violence she had been hiding. But James was insistent. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, crouching down so that he was at her level. "Please, tell me. I can help." Mia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My dad," she paused, tears filling her eyes. He hurts me sometimes." James felt a wave of anger surge through him. He had heard rumors about Mia's father, a man who had been abusive in the past, but hearing it from the child's mouth was a different matter entirely. This was real, and it was happening under his very roof. He stood up, his fists clenched. "Where is he now?" he demanded. Mia pointed weakly toward the back of the house, where her father's quarters were located. Without another word, James turned and made his way toward the back of the mansion, his mind racing with thoughts of how to confront this man who dared to harm a child. He knew that nothing would ever be the same after this. Mia had already changed his perspective, and now it was time for him to act. James stormed through the back corridors of the mansion, his thoughts racing with fury and confusion. He had always prided himself on running a tight ship, managing his empire with precision. But this was something he never saw coming. As he approached the door to the small quarters where Mia's father, Paul, lived, he could feel the tension in his muscles. His hand hovered over the door handle for a moment before he forced it open. The smell of stale alcohol, and old food hit him immediately. The room was small, cluttered with old furniture, and it seemed to have been left to decay. In the far corner, Paul sat slumped in a chair, his face red with anger or perhaps the remnants of a hangover. He didn't look up as James entered. "What do you want?" Paul's voice was slurred, rough from years of alcohol abuse. "I want to know why you've been hurting your daughter," James said, his voice calm but filled with an undeniable edge. The words seemed to hang in the air, thick with accusation. Paul's eyes flickered up, and for a moment, James saw a flash of something. Fear, guilt, or perhaps just a reflex of shame. But it was gone in an instant. "You don't know what you're talking about," Paul muttered, shifting in his seat. "Mia's just a troublemaker, always looking for attention." James felt his blood boil at the dismissive tone, but he kept his cool. "I saw the bruise on her arm, Paul," James said, stepping closer. "You're not going to get away with this." Paul's expression shifted, the mask slipping for just a second. He was no longer the man who had been too drunk to notice his daughter's pain. He was a man on the defensive. "I didn't mean to hurt her," Paul muttered, his voice weak. She just keeps pushing me." James's fists clenched at his sides. He took a deep breath, trying to rein in the surge of emotion. "That's not an excuse," he said, his voice firm. "You're going to stop hurting her, or I'll make sure you face the consequences." Paul sneered, clearly unafraid. "What are you going to do?" "She's my daughter. You're just the rich guy who owns this place." James paused, considering for a moment. The way Paul spoke, the lack of respect, the arrogance, it all clicked. He wasn't dealing with just a man with problems. He was dealing with a bully, someone who felt untouchable, someone who thought he could get away with anything. But James wasn't about to let that happen. "No, Paul," James said, his voice growing cold. "I'm the one who's in charge here, and I will make sure you pay for what you've done. You will never hurt Mia again." Paul didn't respond. He just sat there, slumped in his chair, staring at the floor. James turned and walked out, his mind already racing with plans for what came next. He couldn't just fire Paul. This wasn't a simple matter of getting rid of a bad employee. This was about protecting Mia, ensuring her safety. And that meant taking action. He went straight to his office, pulled out his phone, and made a call. The next few hours would change everything. The authorities needed to be involved. Mia had to be taken out of this situation, and Paul needed to face justice. James knew it wouldn't be easy. He didn't expect the road ahead to be simple or without resistance. But for the first time in a long while, James felt a sense of purpose, a sense of right and wrong that went beyond profit margins and business deals. This was about doing what was right. This was about standing up for someone who had no voice. The journey to fixing this would be long, but James was determined to see it through. James knew that taking the next step would not be easy, but he couldn't just walk away from this. The conversation with Paul had shaken him, but it had also solidified his resolve. He had to protect Mia, and that meant ensuring her safety at all costs. James immediately called the authorities, providing all the details he had gathered. He made sure that they understood the severity of the situation, that this was about a child's well-being, not just a workplace issue. As he hung up the phone, he felt a strange mixture of anger and determination. Mia was still so young, and yet she had already faced a life filled with unimaginable pain. It wasn't right, and James was determined to make it right. A few hours later, James returned to the mansion, his mind set on the next steps. He knew he had to take immediate action. He found Mia sitting in the same spot as before, her eyes red from crying. She looked up when she saw him, her gaze hesitant but hopeful. "Are you okay?" James asked gently, kneeling down beside her. Mia nodded slightly, but James could see the fear in her eyes. She was still scared, still unsure of what would happen next. "You're safe now," he said, trying to reassure her. "I've called the authorities. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Mia's eyes widened, and she looked up at him in surprise. She had never expected someone like him to care about her, let alone intervene in her life. She had always felt invisible, just a maid's daughter, never worthy of anyone's attention. But now, for the first time, someone was standing up for her. James gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Everything is going to be okay," he said softly. "We're going to make sure that no one hurts you again." Mia's face crumpled, and for a moment, she seemed like she was going to cry again, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was as though the weight she had been carrying for so long was finally starting to lift. Later that afternoon, Mia was taken to a safe place, a foster home, where she could start to heal, both physically and emotionally. James made sure that she was surrounded by people who cared for her, people who would give her the love and care she deserved. The process was not easy, and James knew it wouldn't be immediate. Healing took time, but at least now Mia was in a place where she could begin that journey. Meanwhile, Paul was arrested, and the authorities were handling the legal process. James had no tolerance for what Paul had done, and he made sure that the man would face the consequences of his actions. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. Mia deserved justice, and James was determined to ensure she got it. As the days passed, James found himself thinking about Mia often. He had always been focused on his business, his empire, but this experience had changed him. It had opened his eyes to the realities that many people, especially children, faced every day. James couldn't undo the past, but he could make sure that Mia's future was brighter. He decided that he would do everything in his power to help her heal, even if it meant stepping out of his comfort zone. He wasn't just a billionaire anymore. He was someone who had witnessed a child suffering and had taken action to stop it. He had learned that sometimes, doing the right thing meant taking risks, but it was a risk he was willing to take. The next time James saw Mia, she was smiling. It was a small smile, hesitant at first, but it was real. And that, to James, meant everything. James sat in his office, staring out of the large windows that overlooked his empire. The sprawling city below seemed so far away from the personal battle he had just faced. It was the first time in his life that he had truly questioned his own motivations. He had always been focused on business, profits, investments, expanding his empire, but today, everything felt different. The events surrounding Mia had shaken him to his core. She wasn't just another employee's child. She was a little girl who deserved to be protected and loved. After ensuring that Mia was safe and well cared for in her new foster home, James turned his attention to the next step. What would happen to Paul? It was clear that Paul would face the consequences of his actions, but James wasn't sure what that would look like. He had always believed in second chances, but the abuse Mia had endured was unforgivable. He needed to make sure that this never happened again, not just for Mia, but for anyone who might be suffering in silence. James began researching ways to provide better resources for those in need, especially for children who found themselves in abusive environments. He knew that Mia's story was just one of many, and he felt a responsibility to make a real difference. Of his personal wealth to fund it, knowing that it would make a lasting impact. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about creating real change. He met with survivors, listened to their stories, and shared Mia's story with the world. The response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out, offering support, donations, and help in any way they could. It was as if a door had been opened, and people were finally talking about something that had been hidden for far too long. James had learned so much during this journey. He had learned that power and wealth could do a lot, but the real power came from making the right choices, standing up for what was right, and helping those who needed it most. As he visited Mia in her new home, he saw a different side of her, a side he hadn't seen before. She was no longer the scared little girl who tried to disappear into the background. She was a child full of hope, a child who was starting to believe that the world wasn't as dark as she once thought. Mia smiled at him, her eyes bright with a newfound sense of security. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but strong. James smiled back, his heart swelling with pride. "No, Mia," he said gently. "Thank you for teaching me what really matters." The foundation had just begun, but James knew that this was only the start. Mia's journey was far from over, and so was his. He had learned a valuable lesson, that real wealth isn't measured in dollars and properties, but in the ability to change someone's life for the better. Months had passed since Mia had entered the foster home, and James had kept in regular contact with her, making sure she was settling in well. He had seen the changes in her, the way her face now carried a hint of peace, a far cry from the scared little girl she once was. He had helped build a foundation in her name, a foundation dedicated to children like her, who had no voice to speak out against the abuse they suffered. James had also worked hard to make sure Paul faced the full extent of the law for what he had done. But despite everything, James still felt like there was more to do. One day as he sat in his office reviewing the progress of the foundation, he received a call from Mia's caseworker. She informed him that Mia was making incredible strides in therapy and was showing a strong desire to pursue her education. James listened closely, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. This was the kind of life Mia deserved, a chance to live free from fear, to learn and grow like any other child. The caseworker mentioned that Mia had expressed a deep interest in art, specifically painting, and had already begun to create pieces that displayed her raw talent. James couldn't help but smile at the thought. It seemed that Mia had found something that allowed her to express herself fully, a gift she could nurture and carry with her through her life. He decided that he wanted to support her, but not just financially. He wanted to make sure that Mia knew she had someone in her corner who believed in her. A few days later, James arranged a visit to Mia's foster home. When he arrived, he was greeted by the familiar sight of her shy, yet warm smile. Mia had grown taller, her face now radiating with the glow of a child who felt safe. She led him into her room, where several paintings hung on the walls, landscapes, abstract pieces, and portraits that seemed to tell a story of both sorrow and hope. "These are amazing, Mia," James said, his voice full of admiration. "You're really talented." Mia blushed, a small but genuine smile spreading across her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I like painting. It helps me feel better." James nodded, understanding more than she realized. "You have a gift, Mia. You should never stop doing what makes you happy." He paused for a moment, then added, "I want to help you pursue this. I want to make sure you have every opportunity to succeed, no matter where life takes you." Mia's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked uncertain. "You mean, you'll help me? With my art?" she asked softly. "Of course," James replied. "I'll make sure you have everything you need to develop your talent. I've already made arrangements for you to attend art classes at a local academy, and I'm funding your materials. I want to see you go as far as you can." Mia's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice shaking. James smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm here for you. You're not alone anymore." That day, James left with a promise to Mia. He would continue to support her in any way he could. As he drove back to his mansion, he reflected on how far both of them had come. Mia had found strength in her art, and James had found a new purpose in helping her and countless other children like her. The journey wasn't over, but it was clear that the foundation was just the beginning. The changes they had set in motion would continue to ripple out, affecting lives far beyond what they had imagined. As James looked out at the horizon, he realized that this was the most important work he would ever do, helping a child find her way in a world that once seemed so cold, but now held endless possibilities. As the weeks went by, Mia began to flourish in ways that James had never imagined possible. Her art classes, funded by the foundation, had not only given her the technical skills she needed, but they had also opened up a new world for her, a world where her voice could be heard through her brushstrokes. She poured her emotions into her paintings, and with each piece, she told a story. The pain she had once carried seemed to fade away, replaced by the joy of creation and the discovery of her own strength. James continued to check in on her progress, always impressed by her growth. He had made sure that Mia had everything she needed: art supplies, mentorship, and a safe space where she could express herself without fear. But he knew that her journey was far from over. Mia had come so far, but there was still the issue of her past, the trauma that had once consumed her. James had always believed that healing wasn't a linear process. Some days would be harder than others. Some days, Mia would struggle with the memories, but she was no longer alone. She had the support she needed, and that was a powerful thing. One afternoon, as James visited the art academy where Mia now studied, he watched her stand in front of her latest painting, lost in thought. The piece was different from the others, darker, more intense, but there was something raw and beautiful about it. Mia turned to him with a hesitant smile. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice uncertain. James stepped closer to the canvas, studying the intricate details. It was a painting of a woman, surrounded by shadows, yet there was a light in her eyes, a light that seemed to break through the darkness. "It's incredible, Mia," James said, his voice filled with admiration. "You've captured something powerful here. You're telling a story, and it's a story that deserves to be heard." Mia's eyes widened, and she bit her lip, clearly trying to hold back tears. It's about me," she whispered. James paused, his heart aching for her. He had always known that Mia's journey was not just about escaping her past, but about facing it head-on. She had found a way to express her pain, her healing, and her hope all in one piece of art. "You've come so far," James said softly, "and you've done it all on your own. But remember, you're not alone anymore. You have people who care about you, people who will support you every step of the way." Mia smiled through her tears, and for the first time, James saw the woman she was becoming, a woman who had the power to transform her pain into something beautiful. James knew that Mia was ready for whatever came next in her life. She had the strength to face her past, and now, she had the tools to shape her future. He left the academy that day with a sense of peace in his heart. Mia had not only found herself through art, but she had also found her voice. And James knew that her journey had only just begun. The foundation he had created in her name had already made a significant impact, but he knew that there was still so much more to do. More children needed to hear their stories, more lives needed to be changed. And as long as he could, he would continue to fight for those who had no voice, just as Mia had once had none. He would make sure that Mia's story, and the stories of countless others, would never be forgotten. The weeks turned into months, and Mia's transformation continued to amaze everyone around her. With each passing day, she became more confident, more expressive, and more connected to the world around her. The Art Academy had become a second home for her, a place where she could truly be herself, where she could explore her emotions through colors and strokes, and where she felt understood. James was proud of what Mia had accomplished, but he knew there was still more to be done. The foundation was growing, helping more children like Mia, and with each success, James felt a deep sense of fulfillment. One evening, as James sat at his desk, looking through the latest updates from the foundation, he received a call that would change everything. It was Mia's caseworker, who informed him that Mia had been invited to display her artwork at a prestigious gallery in the city. It was a huge opportunity, one that could launch Mia's art career and bring even more attention to the foundation's cause. James felt a surge of excitement and pride for her. He immediately called Mia to share the news. "Mia," he said, his voice full of excitement, "you're going to have your own show. They want to showcase your paintings at the gallery." Mia's voice trembled with disbelief. "Really? Are you sure? My paintings?" she asked, her words slow, as if she couldn't quite grasp what he was saying. "Yes, absolutely," James replied. "You've worked so hard, and now the world is going to see the talent you have. You deserve this, Mia." Mia's voice cracked, and James could hear the emotion in her words. "I don't know what to say, Mr. Caldwell. This is a dream come true." "You don't have to say anything," James said, his tone warm and encouraging. "Just know that I'm here for you every step of the way. This is your moment, Mia, and I'm so proud of you." The exhibition was set for the following month, and James was determined to make it the best it could be. He made arrangements for the gallery, for transportation of Mia's artwork, and for a team to help with the setup. He wanted everything to be perfect for her. As the day of the exhibition approached, Mia grew nervous. It was hard for her to imagine that people would actually want to look at her art. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, so the thought of having her work displayed for the world to see was overwhelming. James could sense her anxiety, and he reassured her every chance he got. "You've already done the hard part, Mia," he told her. "You've created something beautiful. Now it's time for others to see it." On the night of the exhibition, the gallery was filled with people, art lovers, collectors, and critics, all gathered to see Mia's work. James stood beside her, watching as people admired her paintings. It was a surreal moment for both of them. Mia had come from a place of unimaginable pain, and now she was standing in front of a crowd, sharing her story through her art. It was more than just a gallery opening. It was a statement. It was proof that no matter what had happened in the past, she had the strength to rise above it. As the night wore on, James saw the transformation in Mia. She no longer seemed nervous or uncertain. She was standing tall, talking to guests with a newfound confidence, sharing her story through her art. People were moved by her work, and the foundation received even more support that evening. As the event came to a close, James took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. Mia's journey was far from over, but she had come so far. She had found her voice, her passion, and her purpose. James knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, But he also knew that Mia was no longer the scared, silent girl she had once been. She was a young woman with a bright future ahead of her, and James was honored to be a part of her journey. As they left the gallery that night, Mia turned to James, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I never thought I would be here, showing my work to the world." James smiled, his heart full. "No, Mia," he said. "Thank you. You've taught me more than I could ever teach you." The night was a victory, not just for Mia, but for all the children whose voices had yet to be heard. And as James looked at her, he knew that this was only the beginning. Months passed since Mia's first exhibition, and the world had taken notice of her talent. She was no longer just the girl who had suffered in silence. She was an artist, a young woman whose work spoke volumes about resilience, strength, and the power of transformation. James continued to support her, but it was clear that Mia had begun to find her own path, one where she was in control of her future. The foundation had grown even more, with donors and volunteers offering their support, eager to help children in need. James had seen the ripple effect of his decision to step in and help Mia. The foundation was changing lives, and he knew that it wasn't just about providing resources. It was about giving children the opportunity to tell their stories and to have those stories heard. But even as the foundation flourished, James remained focused on Mia. He wanted her to know that no matter how successful she became, she was never alone. He had made a promise to her, and he intended to keep it. One afternoon, James received an unexpected call. It was Mia's caseworker again, but this time, the news was different. Mia had been offered a scholarship to attend one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. It was a life-changing opportunity, one that would allow her to further develop her craft and shape her future in ways she had never imagined. James felt a rush of pride. He knew this day would come, but hearing the news still took him by surprise. He immediately called Mia to share the news. "Mia," he said, his voice full of excitement, "you've been accepted to one of the best art schools in the country. This is your chance to go even further with your art." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" Mia finally asked, her voice tentative. "Yes, Mia. I'm sure," James replied. "This is your dream. You've worked so hard to get here, and now it's time to take the next step. I'll be here to support you, every step of the way." Mia's voice shook as she whispered, "I can't believe it. I thought I was just a girl who painted in her room, and now I have a chance to do something real." James smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You've always had a chance, Mia. You just needed someone to believe in you." That evening, James met with Mia to discuss the scholarship. They talked about the next steps, the challenges she would face, and the excitement of embarking on this new chapter in her life. Mia was nervous but excited. She had come so far, and now she had the chance to pursue her passion on a much larger scale. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. As they sat together, James couldn't help but reflect on how far Mia had come. He had watched her grow from a terrified, silent child into a confident young woman who was taking control of her destiny. He had seen her transform her pain into something beautiful, and now she was on the verge of a new adventure, one that would take her even further than she had ever imagined. The foundation had given Mia the opportunity to flourish, but it was her own determination, her own strength, that had carried her this far. James knew that whatever the future held, Mia was ready to face it head-on. She had already proven that she had the heart of an artist, and that was something no one could take away from her. As Mia prepared to leave for art school, James gave her one last piece of advice. "Remember," he said, "you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just keep doing what you love, and the rest will follow." Mia smiled, a mix of gratitude and excitement in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've given me a chance to have a life I never thought was possible. I'll never forget that." James smiled warmly, watching as Mia walked into her future, knowing that her story was just beginning. Mia stood in front of the large canvas, her brush poised in the air as she stared at the blank space before her. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the lights overhead and the distant sound of traffic outside. She had come a long way from the frightened girl she once was. No longer hidden in the shadows, Mia was now a confident young woman, ready to face the world on her own terms. The scholarship to art school had been a life-changing opportunity, But it was the love and encouragement she had received from James that had truly made the difference. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her talent, and to understand that her past didn't define her future. The gallery exhibition, the support of the foundation, and the new chapter in her life had all been steps toward reclaiming her power. But now, as she prepared for her first major solo show at a prestigious art gallery, she felt a sense of calm she had never known before. Mia had found a new purpose in her art, and with every stroke, she poured a little more of herself into each painting. It wasn't just about creating for the sake of creating anymore. It was about telling her story, about showing the world who she was and what she had overcome. James had been there through every step, always offering advice, encouragement, and the space she needed to grow. The impact he had made on her life was undeniable. It wasn't just about the financial support or the connections he had provided. It was the way he had shown her what it meant to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. And now, Mia was ready to take the world by storm. As the days passed, she worked tirelessly on her new collection, each piece more powerful than the last. Her art was becoming her voice, and she had something to say. She didn't have to hide anymore. She was no longer the scared little girl who had been trapped by fear and abuse. She was an artist, a creator, and someone who was in control of her own future. The night of her solo exhibition arrived, and the gallery was packed with art enthusiasts, collectors, and critics. James stood at the back of the room, watching with pride as Mia mingled with the crowd, speaking about her work with confidence. She had done it. She had come full circle. Mia was no longer defined by her past. She was defined by her talent, her resilience, and her unwavering spirit. The show was a success, with several of her paintings being sold and numerous offers for future exhibitions. But more than that, Mia had gained something even more valuable, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and the realization that she had the power to change her own life. As the night came to an end, Mia took a moment to step outside the gallery. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and she breathed in the cool night air, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had made it. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had been worth every step. And as she stood there, looking out at the world before her, she knew that this was just the beginning. There was so much more ahead, and she was ready to face it with the strength and determination that had brought her this far. With a smile on her face, Mia stepped back inside, ready to embrace whatever came next.